go. How many people, who do you have there in person?
I have Jody, Mike, and Ryan, and myself, and Pam.
Okay. Okay, let's get going. Call the meeting to order. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? All right, hearing none, let's move on through the agenda. And Pat, did you want to go ahead and set it up and get us started?
That'd be perfect. Madam Chair, Jody, I can't tell if anybody else is on via
Mary
virtual.
Michael looks like.
Well, no, I see Mary Michael. I just didn't know if there was another board member. I see Anne Marie. So I'm not sure if maybe we want to hold off on the board philosophy side unless Kristen, you and Jody feel comfortable. Really, the 2 points that we've discussed in the past has been, various conversations with board members indicates that there's been, some questions about location of land and that sort of thing. And really the bottom line is, does the board really want to have any input on location or land ownership? I mean, other than our willingness to do so. So that's one. And then again, various conversations have various questions have gotten into deep dives, perhaps, of some of the operational and financial information that's been provided. And I think that for everyone's edification, we need, I think, collectively to be on the same page as to, number one, does the board really have any interest in location or that sort of thing of land? And the other one is are they happy with Mike and I helping drive on the financial side? So.
All right, thanks. I texted Jim and Hi to see if they'll be joining us. I know Peter is out due to a family matter, so.
If you want, we can hold in, I can move to really the nuts and bolts of the narrative with Ryan and his group and us, and then we can come back to the board philosophy if, a little later.
Okay, let's do that. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks. With that in mind, I want to thank Jody particularly for his involvement in the last meeting that we had, and Kristen, yours certainly as we've been going along in this. Jody's history with acquisitions and mergers and that sort of been very helpful in raising some questions. And I thought we had a really, really good meeting, and which led to a follow-up meeting last Friday of Mike, Ryan, and I, which again, I was very pleased with. And so that's really the point of reference for today, is just to give the board an update on that meeting. There was a request for some financials that we reviewed on Friday, and I sent that out earlier. Ryan has it as part of a presentation, but I also, like I said, sent it out a little bit earlier to have some viewing on it. But what I thought I'd do is present, I guess, some personal reference, historical, and Mike is here certainly to provide the verification on the legal side. Again, some questions or discussion that's come up in various meetings. So a little historical reference was back in 2013, I visited Greensboro, North Carolina. And upon the return from that, there was actually a group put together, and there was a PowerPoint presentation I provided to city and to the board at that time. But the reason I bring this up is because, again, not only is it an idea that's been out there for some time, but some of the players that have been involved, and you'll recognize some of these names. Bruce Stratton, who at the time local CPA and president of the USA Swimming. Mark Coyle, who at the time was director of athletics for Boise State. Jim Everett, who at the time was CEO of the YMCA. Kristen Hill, who was the head swimming coach for the women's team at Boise State. Jeff Irwin, same Jeff is involved now. Andy Erstead, local architect, but very involved with swimming as well. And Julie Prince, Association of Idaho High School Swimming. And then Mike Shanahan, who was former CEO of Boise Office Equipment and a competitive swimmer. So again, an idea that's been out there for some time and certainly had some due diligence done even back then. And those meetings continued on until things just didn't seem practical. Highlight of the new financial commitment in discussions with Ryan is now approximately 1.9 million in land and plus or minus about $1 million for the cover. We wanted to talk about the general outline of an agreement. It's in process, and I'll let Mike speak to that in a minute. Again, we've been putting together sort of a loose agreement at this point. Mike's been in charge of that, and he has some things prepared. The feasibility study presented by Convention Sports and Leisure, that'll be an action item during the regular board meeting. I'd like approval to move forward with that peer review. It's about a 3 to 4 week turnaround, so pretty quick. We don't want to drag this out, certainly for Ryan and his group. The cost to the district is $17,000. And again, I sent that out earlier for the board to take a look at. So there will be a formal ask during the regular meeting. You know, the district, there has been a discussion about, well, what happens if it fails for some reason, or what's the district's recourse? Well, we continue to own the land, and but potentially the facility that would exist on it. And given where land prices are currently and the fact that they continue to go up, there appears to be a minimal risk for the district at that point. Another question that has come up is statutory obligations met, and I'm going to ask Mike to weigh in as we go through this. But the general purpose and public purpose of our statute really talks about what it means to the inhabitants of the district. So the district's mission is economic impact and the positive things that can come from this particular project. So first and foremost, and as I indicated, Jim Everett was part of those discussions early on. Dave Duro and I have spoken recently. I'm certainly not going to speak for Dave, but we have had some conversations. And the facility that's in question doesn't compete with the Y, it actually complements it. There's a couple of different philosophies and missions that are involved. You know, the Y is driven by community and civic needs, and quite frankly, do an outstanding job with that. Problem is they just can't support a full racing program while providing the same community services that they're asked to provide. ICA, by the other hand, the Idaho Competitive Aquatics organization that Ryan and his team are involved with, you know, they can provide racing opportunities that doesn't exist anywhere else. And Ryan will probably speak to that. It doesn't exist really anywhere in the state. So again, the pool designs are completely different. They serve different purposes. The Y pools don't have the depth that is needed for racing, while the proposed project is exactly that. It's a race platform first, and then will absolutely help support community needs in helping teach kids to swim, as well as other community involved activities. And again, Ryan will speak to that. He has spoken to that in the past. So there is an existing demand for more water in the community, and particularly a competitive facility for local schools and other athletes. And so again, ICA will serve that particular niche of the market that doesn't exist in other facilities. So again, the Y and this facility can actually be very complementary in their efforts, both directed at community as well as sports needs. And one of the most important things for me, in fact, back even in 2013 when I proposed this initially to the board, was the increase in economic impact. These facilities will drive local usage, but really for us at the district level, the concern or the opportunity really is in room night generation and other economic impacts, given the tertiary market. So for instance, you've got new visitors that'll come to the market. It's predominantly a drive market. So again, you've got hotel occupancies, which affects both positively the hotels themselves, the businesses surrounding those facilities, but also the district through room tax revenues. And you have the retail impact in restaurants, bars, grocery stores, C-stores. And potentially there could be a direct impact for Boise Center, as some of these events, if they have banquets that are related to awards or orientation banquets or those sorts of things, or if some of these decide to bring in a nationally or internationally known swimmer that can be a speaker for an event. So the facility, our facility at South Boise Center, actually has the opportunity to gain as well. Mike, anything I missed on any of that as far as the statutory obligations, general purpose?
Depends on how much detail you want.
Well, I think if you want, we can stand for questions when we're done, but
Sure.
but again, those are the key components of why this is a project the district can be involved with from a legal and community support.
Yeah, actually, maybe you want me to just maybe the before the statutory part, you want me to maybe briefly address the constitutional part of it?
That'd be great. Thanks.
So on the constitutional part of it, Madam Chair, so I think it's, so there's sort of two things. One is that, and I think this should be obvious to everyone, but one of the things the district is normally concerned about are the debt limitations in Article 8, Section 3, which we don't have here because one, we aren't borrowing money, we're using our own money, and two, we aren't then entering into a long-term obligation which is obligating us. It's the reverse. So we don't have this normal Article 8, Section 3 concerns that we usually worry about when we're doing a project. And then second, the other constitutional issue is probably Article 12, Section 4, which is the one which talks about how municipality or municipal institutions such as the district may not make a donation or loan its credit to a company. And in this instance, the reason that we satisfy that is because the legislature, as Pat mentioned, acknowledged that in 674902 that our purpose is to finance sports arenas and facilities of a similar nature. So we've got that pursuant to 674901, as Pat mentioned, will serve the public need and use. And so those help us get to the public purpose part of it. Plus, our folks at Idaho Competitive Aquatics, ICA, is that the right acronym? They're also going to be providing, water safety and similar classes to address, childhood drowning and safety. So that's a public safety issue. So we get the issue about a public purpose, and then related to that, we'll also be, receiving a return on our investment. And, I think that's something that Ryan's going to address in his presentation. And in addition to that ROI, the district's always going to own the land, and we'll ultimately end up, owning everything on it. Well, or we'll have it all once the lease goes away. And, and finally, as Pat mentioned, there's this economic benefit that's generated in addition to room taxes. So we're able to satisfy all those kind of concerns about public purpose, et cetera, and that meets our constitutional requirements. And then I think Pat walked through the statutory limitations. I guess the one additional thing, Pat, is we're doing this pursuant to 4922A, which is the specific provision which provides the ability of the district to lease property to third parties, and it specifically says, notwithstanding anything else in the act, you can enter into these kind of leases. So that sort of satisfies our statutory issues. And otherwise, as Pat mentioned, we don't have the competition problem because we're not really in competition. We're in, cooperation, I guess, or assistance. And so I think we managed to satisfy both the constitutional and all the statutory concerns.
Any questions for us before?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I might have missed it. The structure, have we defined the structure? What our involvement would be, if any, in the management?
One of the things that I had that here. Yes, as a matter of fact, we did discuss that. There's a concern as to how deep into the actual operations the district should get, and Mike can address some of that. But one of the things that Ryan is certainly supportive of is regular reports to the board, particularly on utilization, upcoming events, that sort of thing, so that again, we can continue to tie in the economic impact to the community as well as the utilization of the facility. Without getting into pure financials, which again, could be a legal concern, making sure that the facility is staying busy. It's just like this one. You know, the board wants to know how busy we are. What's our utilization? Obviously, in our case, the board also is concerned about financial position and that sort of thing. But this is who we are. This is what we do. For another entity, same thing with the CVB. We have a direct financial relationship through a contract with them. But as it pertains to day-to-day operations, that's something that we don't ever get involved with, and there's legal ramifications of doing so. But they report to us as they report to the board, as you know, on a pretty regular basis about performance. So how many groups have we booked? How many room nights are coming to the facility and to the community? So again, utilization is a key factor in success or lack thereof. So what we asked of Ryan is that on a regular basis, and that can be monthly or it can be quarterly, we could tie it into our the quarterly reports that you receive from the board or from the staff. We could just tie it as part of that. Again, what are their pre-sales doing? What are their marketing efforts? What's their facility utilization? To me, that's key. That's going to, again, my opinion is that will tell us as much about the success of the facility as looking at financials, because if it's empty, obviously it's not going to succeed. If they've got these groups, particularly coming from out of town, and sponsoring these functions, filling room nights is key. Again, it's that economic impact. That again, this is my perspective, not representative of the boards for sure. But if we're going to look at how the facility is doing again, and we look at like here, we have that local component of Boise Center that we absolutely count on, that we have to have for the foundation of our financials. But the goal of the facility and the goal of the district is putting heads in beds. So we have to have conventions, and that's how we succeed as a community. And to me, that's the expectation I would have of this facility as representing the board. Now, again, whatever the board decides you want to see is something certainly still to be discussed. But again, from my perspective, looking at the future bookings, looking at how busy they plan to be in the future, filling in the weekends, the dark spaces in the future, to me, that's key.
Well, and also the type of events or the type of programs that they're running, just so that we are sure that we're meeting that public purpose, checking that box. So, identifying, which programs are running.
Yep.
And the attendance of those. Yep.
Absolutely. And I don't want to speak for Ryan and his group, but this was a topic specifically addressed last Friday on how the district could gauge their success without getting into proprietary financial information that really we don't want to be getting into. So that's why, for me, again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it's that utilization factor. And Kristen, to your point, it's what types of groups are coming in, how many local swim teams are using, what are the activities that are going on at the facility that are keeping it busy. But again, to me, given the district's involvement, I want to know how many events are coming in, or how many rooms are being utilized through the course of the year. What events are bringing outside attendees, new people to the market, what's driving that economic impact. And that's, from my perspective, representing the district, that's where I'm coming from. So
I think what I'm trying to ask, Madam Chair, is sort of on two levels.
Mm-hmm.
One level is our goal in entering into this deal. And I've been thinking of it as synonymous with the Convention Bureau. The difference is, with the Convention Bureau, they report to us about what they're doing. And then every year we give them 700,000?
it's about 700,000.
700,000. So if one day we find out that they're not doing what we want to do, we just don't give them the money. This is kind of the opposite of that. We make the investment upfront and our return potentially increases with their success. The more success the aquatic center has, the more heads and beds, as you say,
Right.
which increases our return on the
Correct.
deal.
Mhm.
So that moves me to the issue of governance. How do we make sure that the objectives that you are outlining today happen? And if they don't happen, how do we make them happen?
Could we, I know we, talked about maybe some sort of, I know we do this potentially for some other groups, or the CVB does it for groups, but basically an incentive structure based on, rent. If they meet an X number of heads and beds or X number of types of events or something like that, to where that if they're meeting the goals, and I think heads and beds is probably the easiest way to track that on the different programs that they would be providing, some sort of reduction in rent.
I think what Cody or what Jody's asking for, if I'm hearing it correctly, is how do we hold them accountable for performance?
So do you think, would it be, I've got sort of 10 bullet points that would go in the contract, and maybe describing those, they're bullet points, so they're short, might kind of put it in perspective. I think maybe it kind of gets to Jody's point.
Yeah, well, first of all, I very much appreciate, Ryan, the additional spreadsheet
Right.
work.
Right.
It's very helpful. And helps us demonstrate to people that we're doing the diligence that you would expect of people spending the public's money. I just, and I think you giving us an outline of contract points would be helpful.
Right. And I guess I should say, Madam Chair, this is I'm kind of making, I shouldn't say I'm making this up, but not that we've really, discussed this with Ryan's group in any detail at all, but I think it's kind of more or less, I think, what the board is likely to be looking for based on a few conversations we've had with various board members. So I can just kind of hit the high points, and again, it's all going to be subject to negotiation. But so I think it's, obviously it's going to be 30 years. That's what we are allowed to have. It'll be a lease term of 30 years, but the district would own the land, and then, the improvements are built, and we're effectively leasing everything to the ICA folks.
Excuse me, Madam
Yeah.
Chair. We own land and the cover, but not the pool.
Yes, so we'll be, effectively, they'll put in the money for the pool, we'll put in the money for the cover, we'll be leasing them all of our interests, whatever that may be, and likely we create some kind of, joint ownership or something of the improvements that are on the land. Again, exactly how we structure that is, we're effectively, whatever it is that we're leasing to them, they'll have control of it for 30 years.
Yeah, okay.
I think that as part of the commitment, presumably before we put on our dollars, they'll also demonstrate that they've got sufficient capital to pay for their improvements, whether that's sitting in a bank account or whatever it is we deem, appropriate. They'll demonstrate they've got the capacity to cover their initial operating losses, and I'm assuming you'll have initial operating losses, and meet ongoing capital needs. The district won't have any obligation to provide any funds. We'll just be other than whatever it is we're committing up front. Otherwise, it's not our operation. In the event of default, and I think this is one of the things that sort of gets to your point, Jody, in the event of default, and we'll talk about, obviously there'd be more detail about what's an event of default and how does it get cured, et cetera. But in the event of default, ultimately, effectively, the lease is canceled and we have the property. I mean, that, if they're not meeting whatever requirements it is we want them to meet, it ultimately then is effectively our facility. And so I think that's and then what it is we're looking for them to do is presumably we need them to operate it. And Madam Chair, I think this goes to your point. We need them to operate it consistent with the purposes that they've outlined to us. so we can provide those, the public purpose requirement for our, per our statute and to meet our constitutional requirements. And so, they've kind of provided this general outline, and then as Pat mentioned, what we'll then be getting is monthly or quarterly or whatever it is, and perhaps, Ryan's group shows up every 3 months along with the other board presentation and says, hey, here's how it's going, and lets the board know. And again, they're providing us this information initially, their projections based on their discussions with, I think other facilities and what their estimates are here. And obviously it's all going to be somewhat of a work in process, but they'll be providing us sufficient information that we can figure out that they're meeting the public purpose. And I think that's obviously the one of the real keys for us is we've got to make certain that, it meets our statutory requirements. And we'll be able to use that peer review path that you're getting as, again, to help us kind of create whatever it is we think we need to see. And, then they'll be paying annual rent and whatever basis it is, we all negotiate with each other. And then I think, Madam Chair, as you mentioned, the rent may be lower, maybe there's an offset, maybe something happens in terms of whatever information we get about room tax adjustments. And I think that one of the important things then will be, in terms of the information that we get from the ICA folks, will be something about the economic revenue that's generated and the room taxes and exactly how that's all created. Again, I think is something, we need to work through, but that'll be important to make certain this all works. And then I think then the final thing, just technically that'd be in the contract, would be assuming that we're providing money for a cover, we just have to work through the construction requirements and how that gets built. Again, we're providing some money, they're providing money, and we just have to make certain it gets built so we're meeting our statutory requirements for projects. And so I think, Madam Chair, to address Jody's point, I think the idea is that we'd be, and as Pat mentioned, we'd be getting this information, and presumably, it all works and it's all great. And if, in year 3, instead they decide they don't want to hold swim meets anymore, and they want to turn it into a covered bar or something, that obviously is going to meet our requirements. They'll be in default, and then the lease is canceled, and we then do whatever it is with the property that we determine we're going to do. So I think that would be the broad outlines of how it would be structured.
Jody, I don't know that answered your concern totally. And I think the bottom line is, I don't know that there's a financial implication that we would have, at least as we currently view it, that would be financially incumbent on their part to achieve financial success. I don't know that we have that tool. For us, it would be, we own the land, and regardless of what happens, we will always own the land, and supposedly that will increase with value. I don't think that we would have the economic compulsion for them to succeed that you're looking for.
Yeah, I'm thinking out loud a little bit, Madam Chair. I mean, and we'll talk about this at some point, whether this continues to be the kind of thing we ought to be doing, and what return we ought to do if we're doing it. It's clearly not a market return.
Well,
but we have talked about at least covering our cost of capital.
correct.
And so you've got, and the lease payments either get made or they don't. Those are the basic financial restrictions. And then there's the issue of public purpose and the public perception of that. And I can look through on the detail that Ryan's provided, and you can pretty well define, there'll be swim meets, there'll be water polo, there'll be the Masters, aquatic club, swim club, and the like. And I suppose you could have in the contract, we will do these things. And if we do additional things, we have some sort of input. or if we stop doing some of these things.
Oh, and absolutely, from that perspective, Jody, I think that has to be in there. I mean, again, we have statutory requirements we have to maintain. And I would think from the from the district perspective, and at least from my own perspective as an operator, that we better be getting an ROI on the room nights. I mean, part of that whole public purpose and economic impact is making sure that they do all of those things. And if they don't do all of those things, then they would be in default. And from a public purpose standpoint, if we don't want to operate it on our own, we sell the land and hopefully at a profit, and then the district is totally out of it.
Can anyone hear me? This is High Clock. Madam Chair, do you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. I do have a question, but I'll wait for Jody to finish his.
I'll yield there, Senator Clark.
Thank you. Thanks for the promotion too. I do have a question, and I'm sorry that I'm joining late, but I have some work going on at the house that they haven't finished yet. But my question is, what other markets did you study to determine the kinds of events that you'd be able to get? Or is it just that you think you could get certain events to your facility? If you went over that, I apologize again, but do you see what I'm getting at? What are the markets for our competition?
Yeah, hi, thanks for the question. I think the answer to that is really both. There is a mechanism within the sport of swimming in which you go through a process to put place meets, on a specific weekend at a specific venue hosted by either by a venue or by a club team. There are bidding processes that you go through with USA Swimming for some very specific meets. And we did try to outline some of that last month, and I think that Pat's got some of those materials, but in large part within the sport, it's really about the relationships that you have, not only on a local basis, on a regional basis, and a national basis. And those are relationships, of course, that we have, but all of the markets, can draw these meets. I think a great example is a wonderful little 50-meter pool that they have in Pasco, Washington. And they hold fantastic events that has 600-700 swimmers every single time they do these meets. And so it's not necessarily where you're at. It's about the facility that you have and your ability to host a meet and have, X number of kids or swimmers and X number of spectators in your facility. So that's really what we're trying to accomplish. So there isn't the only limitation that we're really faced with in terms of the type of event we have are really kind of based on USA Swimming's criteria for holding, for example, an Olympic trials or US Nationals or US Open. Those are events we know we can't host. It has nothing to do with facility and entirely to do with the elevation.
I don't understand that, but I appreciate the answer. And I'm just trying to get a handle on what you did talk about last month. I heard, which were the financials primarily. And thank you for that spreadsheet. But to get into that range that we're affected because of room nights, and according to your spreadsheet, we're talking about how many people. I think you were looking at $300,000 a meet, or is that a year?
Sure. I think what we've done is look. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or not. Hi. So let me know if I can provide more clarity here. But so twofold. One is there are different levels of meets, and that's what we've tried to outline in the financial packet that you have now. That whether it be this local type meet or a regional type meet or a larger regional or national meet, we've tried to kind of outline what each of those would look like, the number of people that it would bring in, and the specific economic impact that it creates. And those numbers are all derived based on specific examples of meets. And we provided that data to the CBB and they generated the data for us. So those aren't numbers that we're kind of making up on our own. Those are numbers that are provided by the CBB. In terms of how, from local data or from an example of a meet that may occur at another location that we know we can bid on, that we have a high likelihood of getting. That data is used in order to get the projections from CVB. Also,
So
in
the
the-
CVB, I'm sorry, the CVB projected how many room nights we would have based on the data you gave them.
correct.
Okay,
I might comment, hi, because I had the same concern you did last month about the level of detail or lack thereof in the forecasts. When you get into the detail of the spreadsheets that we received this morning, you'll be very pleased.
oh, good.
They have broken it down by local meets, high school meets, regional meets, how many nights, how many room
Oh,
demand,
good.
what the revenue is per night. And then in terms of the operation of the facilities, they have rate per hour per lane. They have rate per unit of daily use. They have rates for lessons, group lessons, private lessons, stroke lessons. So that's just an example of some of the additional detail. But there's obviously been a lot of work done in coming up with this forecast. And then, of course, later, we're going to be asked to approve something I support, which is a feasibility comment by a consultant in the business.
Oh, where is that?
I'm substantially more comfortable with the
Okay,
forecast.
good. But when is the professional in the industry going to report?
Well, we have to discuss that today and approve to start that process.
I got you. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you,
yep.
Madam Chair.
Yep. And kind of in the interest of time, maybe we should move on to Ryan, to your presentation.
Sure. And I think what we wanted to maybe quickly start on before we dive into the financial stuff is mostly just to kind of give you an update with where we're at on the property itself, the due diligence we're going through, and see if you have any questions. Obviously, I've got Melanie here. We've also brought our counsel, Christina Fout, who's helping us through the real estate transactional process. So if you guys have any specific questions about that, we can address it. But I thought Melanie or Christina might want to give an update on where we're at with that process first.
Christina, want to share where we are in the real estate transaction?
Sure. So we have a piece of property under contract now. We're proceeding with due diligence. Just today, I sent in the review of all the issues, exceptions on the title commitment policy. And everything actually looked pretty good there, which I was a little bit surprised at where that property is, being close to the canal and all of that. But so far, things are looking really good.
Nothing too gating on it.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty normal stuff.
Yep.
A list, but normal.
In terms of the actual due diligence, we've got a survey under works. We have the phase 1 going forward, and we have a geotechnical study that's also going forward to examine the soil, make sure we can build what we want to build there. And then the architect's working on the design review process in order to get that through the city process. So we've kind of got all those kind of 4 major things kind of moving forward at the same time.
And Madam Chair, what's the timing?
Yeah, I was gonna say, Chris, where are we on the timeline? So we're what, like 2 weeks in right now on a 60-day with 30-day extension?
Exactly. Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Oh,
Sorry. I was speaking, yeah. Jody, we're about 2 weeks in on the 60-day with the opportunity for a 30-day extension. So all in, we have 90. And so we're about 14 days in, I think.
mhm.
About 2 weeks from when we signed, because I think we signed on Monday or Tuesday 2 weeks ago.
Thank you.
And a question about the process with the city. I know that sometimes that can take a while. Do you feel that you'll be able to make it through that process in enough time?
Yeah, and actually, before we even signed the PSA, our architect and I had a preliminary meeting with the city to get a sense of what they would be looking for, if there was any specific concerns that they needed to be addressed, what type of permitting would be allowed, is it an allowed use? So we've kind of gone through those hurdles, and we kind of have a clear outline of what the city expects, and we don't see any road bumps on that.
Great, thanks.
Madam Chair, I'm confused by what you just said. Did we sign and buy the land?
No, this is all on them.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll jump in. I'm not going to go through all 25 pages of the financial packet. I think there's really just a few pages up front that are worthwhile kind of going through. Obviously want to have time to answer some of your questions as well. And I know that Pat and Mike have probably addressed a few of those. So I'm going to jump forward to kind of the first page of numbers. And again, I know there's a lot of numbers here, but I'll just kind of walk through a few of these and let you guys kind of really dive into the detail as you desire. And you're welcome to either funnel questions directly to me or through Pat. We'll make sure we get anything addressed. So this first page, labeled page 1, is kind of the overall summary of our total projection. What we've done is outlined what our expected revenues are for years 1 through 5, our related expenses, all kind of in basic categories. And then in addition to that, we've also kind of demonstrated our intent to make sure that we place aside additional capital each and every year to ensure that we have available cash if we need to do any sort of additional capital expenditures, either to the pool or the overall structure of the building. And so that's kind of the lower portion there under capital reserve. I mean, as you can see, we're certainly expecting to essentially, use about $120,000 of cash in year 1. And as we see our basic revenue items increase in quantity, because again, and I'll dive into some of this a little bit here in a few slides, but in general, our revenue is really designed around quantity, right? We're selling lane space. We're selling units of lane per hour. We're selling swim lessons. So how many of those lessons do we provide? So as the facility kind of grows from a use standpoint, we'll see our revenue cycles kind of increase. Of course, we'll have some related increase in expenses along the way, but we anticipate that a lot of those expenses will remain fairly stable. And so as you move from year 1 over to year 5, you can see that we'll start to see the modest return that we had anticipated all along once we're able to kind of be operating a little bit more capacity.
Madam Chair, this is Mike. Can I just ask
Yep.
Ryan, because I know hi, and I think maybe Jody had these questions before. I noticed the last page of your presentation, Ryan, I think lists the other places that you sort of have drawn financial information from. So I guess I think you've done this, and I think this is what they'd requested. You managed to track down financial information from other places, and that's kind of what you've used as part of the basis of these numbers. Is that?
Yeah, correct.
Right.
So we've reached out to a number of facilities around the country and to see if someone would be willing to obviously share their information for us and try to find a way to kind of equate that to what we're doing. And so the very last page of the slide deck, I sort of trying to forward all the way to the end. I'll kind of outline the ones that we really kind of focused on. So we received a very robust set of financials from Triangle Aquatic Center, which is based out of Cary, North Carolina. And what I've tried to do on that worksheet is kind of describe what kind of facility they have so that you kind of have a better understanding of how we may relate. So for example, Triangle actually has 3 pools. They have the 50-meter pool we've built. They have the second 25-yard pool. And then they have an additional therapy pool. Plus they have a fitness center. Plus they have a conference center. So a lot of these facilities have a lot more facets to it that we're not trying to tackle. And so it's trying to parse through their financials to see what's applicable and not. But what we really tried to focus on, especially on the expense side, was, gosh, what did they spend on maintenance every month on an annual basis? What did they spend on pool chemicals? What's their staffing needs or requirements? And how does that relate to what we're doing? And so we really used those items directly from their financials and placed them into ours, not just for a sanity check, but knowing that this is actually what it costs to run a pool. So Triangle Aquatics, we leaned on quite a bit. Pikes Peak Athletic Center, which is out of Colorado Springs, that is a fully private entity. They only have a single pool, but they also have a fitness area, a gym, They have a separate physical therapy center in their facility as well. So we kind of leaned on some of their data, specifically with maintenance for the pools and maintenance for their building. We got limited data from Greensboro Aquatic Center. I know Pat's visited the Greensboro Aquatic Center. They have 4 pools now. They've got their 50-meter pool, a therapy pool, a teaching pool, a separate lap pool. I mean, they have a lot of water. In fact, they have, the last I checked, I think it's the largest or most amount of water space in an aquatic center in the country. And so, again, we're trying to take their numbers and how does that translate into what we're trying to accomplish. I've spoken directly with the director at King County Aquatic Center, a gentleman named Mike Dunwitty, who I work closely with on a meet we run there. They're in the process of actually trying to reopen their facility. So he wasn't able to provide stuff at this time, but will once he has some bandwidth to do so. But I've got a lot of experience running events there and have a general idea of what it costs and the type of money that's generated, revenue that's generated by their events. So we use some of that experience on a revenue cycle. We also reached out to an organization out of Texas, Nitro Aquatic Center, and we had a conversation with them, but we have not received anything yet to date. So once we get that, we'll kind of compare and see how that fits in. But really so far, the numbers that we had included really on original projection, and now as you start to see these really in-depth numbers, will start to align with the data we've received from these other facilities.
Madam Chair, Ryan, where'd you get your insurance number?
That's a very rough guess from our insurance agent. And so we'll have to dive into that a little bit more. Keep in mind that we're renting space versus operating. We're operating a swim program, but we're not operating swim teams. And so that insurance cost isn't necessarily there. And so the insurance dynamic's a little bit different than some of these other facilities. Correct. All programs that swim in our pool, USA swimming teams are required, Masters teams are required, USA water polo teams are required. They carry their own insurance. So, we'll obviously have a policy for our facility, but the users of the pool outside of day-to-day users or swim lesson users, the heavy use of the pool will be used by organizations that carry their own insurance.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, one quick question, Ryan. You mentioned, I can't remember what city it was, but one of them was a private facility. Would this be a private club?
Now, I apologize for the use of that term. It's privately owned, but it's not private in the sense of a private country club, right? I mean, this is still a public access pool, not indifferent than the West YMCA, the Boise City Aquatic Center, right? It's operated by the Y, but it's a public pool. Anyone can go and spend their $5 to go in and use the pool. The Pikes Peak is the same example. They're open to the public. Anyone can come and use the facility, but it's privately owned and operated.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yep.
So I'm going to advance one slide. This is page 2. And again, apologize for the small numbers on the screen there, but hopefully you've got a packet in front of you. And again, this is really just focused more specifically on the revenue cycle for each of these years. So year by year, if we start at the top as an example, and let's look at line 1, Boise Swim Club. I actually have a letter of intent from Boise Swim Club saying they're going to use our facility for 650 lane hours per month. Okay, and as you extrapolate that over the course of a year, it's a little bit over 8,000 lane hours that they will use at $12 an hour to get to our revenue figure. They have 85 kids on their team and a wait list of 45 people long. They anticipate needing more space. So as they get into our facility, as their team grows, they'll require more space. We'll rent more lanes to them. I have a letter of intent from Sawtooth Aquatic Club. Same process. Here's what we think we're going to need to start with. Here's what we anticipate our growth to be. Same with the Sawtooth Masters Club. Same with Boise Water Polo. So, and then we penciled in some high schools unnamed. We don't know who those will be, but that's very little revenue from the high school side. It's the kind of the basic rent that they're currently paying to whatever facility they're using. So from a lane rental standpoint, it's really based on, hey, it's $12 an hour to rent a lane, and how many hours are you going to use that lane for? And so that math becomes pretty easy as we kind of go through the process. Daily user income. We do anticipate selling, for example, monthly pass. So rather than somebody have to pay $5 or whatever the dollar rate is every single day, they can pay their, $50 a month and have access to the open swim whenever they'd like. And of course, we'll have daily passes too. Lesson program. We'll certainly have group lessons. We'll have private one-on-one lessons. There'll be stroke clinic lessons. The intent is really to have a program that can start with someone who doesn't know how to swim and develop them into, if all they want to do is learn to swim, great. If they want to perfect their stroke technique, there's a next level. If they want to join a swim team, there'll be a rec team. If they want to get more competitive, they can join one of the other teams. So it's a top to bottom approach and a level of available fee to go through the lesson program before they're able to join one of the programs that are renting space. Of course, then we'll have events, right? So, there's a couple different ways you may run a competition. Again, the venue itself may choose to run an event, and in which case we get to collect the income from that event. Conversely, there's also a club. Any number one of these clubs is going to want to host their own event, in which case they'll pay rent for the use of that facility for that 3 or 4 day swim meet. And so we'll collect rent for that time frame. And then of course, there's going to be, it's ancillary, it's not a whole lot, but we anticipate some sponsorships, some marketing income. We anticipate, basic programming such as all these schools do kayak lessons and scuba lessons and things like that. Those will be part of the programming as well. The next page then is the exact same thing from an expense standpoint. Again, this is an annual approach of what expenses would look like, from staffing to administrative to the pool maintenance to occupancy. And then of course, capital reserve. And I've kind of talked about how we derive some of these expenses. So I won't rehash that unless there's any specific question. But again, we're really trying to pull this data from existing facilities that we think are comparable. Now, I'm going to back up one before we look at that, all those crazy numbers, but the bulk of this packet, there's 20 pages of, you can dive into year one and you can see January through December of both revenue and expenses. And you can dive into year two and you can see monthly revenue expenses, and you can kind of see how that model builds and grows over time. So again, if you've got questions on any of that detail, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll make sure we get those answered. So
Thanks, Ryan.
This next slide is, again, this is what we had kind of talked about, or what Jody had brought up with respect to Hai's question in terms of the number of events we'd like to have, the type of those events, and then the number of room demand and economic impact that the CVB has projected for each type of event, and how that may lay out over a 5-year period and what that may look like from a bottom line standpoint. So again, knowing that it's kind of hard to see some of those numbers on the screen, if we look at year one, we anticipate having 4 local meets. And again, local means most of the kids are local area. Some of the kids are going to travel from other outside areas that will then use hotels and dining and whatnot. We're hopeful that we'll see a couple high school meets in the same vein. We'll definitely have at least one regional meet that will bring in, that 750 count of swimmers, and a large majority of those will be out of town guests. And you can see based on the CVB's estimate that generates a pretty sizable chunk of room demand and also, immediate direct economic impact to the area. And then of course, water polo intends to have some similar events as well. So as we get to the very bottom, what I've tried to draw out is, what do we expect that room demand to look like in year one and year two and so on and so forth? What does that mean from a room revenue standpoint? Pat suggested about $125 a night is going to be kind of the average. And then we, of course, did a room tax generation based on a 5% return. And then we've also, of course, added that direct and total economic impact that the CVB's added. So you can see at the bottom, even at year one, we're going to generate close to 4,000 rooms. Year 5, we're talking closer to 12,000 rooms. economic impact in year 1 could be about 3 million. By year 5, you could see over 9 million. Again, it's all just based on the number of events you have and the type of events you can bring in. Any questions on that? Okay. So the other questions that we've kind of tried to address, or that we've talked about today, is how do we deal with rent, and what does that look like in terms of ICA's obligation to the district, as you guys essentially become our landlord. And so what we've tried to look at is twofold. One is an annual lease obligation. And so when you go through our budget, you'll note that we have drawn out an annual monthly rent obligation that would be paid to the district for use of the land and improvements. And then this slide also throws in the room tax that is generated by the events that are operated in the venue. So in year 1, you'll note, okay, well, if we pay $75,000 in rent, for example, in year 1, and we generate roughly $25,000 in room tax, that we've provided about $100,000 in total return to the district. The table then below shows, okay, well, at what level did the district participate? So if we start with that $3 million number, that creates a 3.3% return. Obviously, as your investment level increases, that return decreases. But even in year 1, for example, if you go all the way down to 5 million, and we're not going there, of course, but if we look at the 3 million line, 3.3%, we get down to the 5 million line. Even in year 1, that return to the district is 2%. The district's current return on your investments is 1.5%.
Ryan, where did you come up with the 75,000 for your annual lease?
It's essentially, check my math on that, but I believe it's 3% of 3 million. Is it 5%? Melody's going to get her phone out. So
And
we
is there any
started.
sort of industry standard, or did you just kind of just pull that out?
Well, Oliver suggested that, for in terms of, land rental and whatnot, that industry standard is about 5%. Yeah. So I started at 75,000 to get to a number that we thought would be certainly affordable from an operational standpoint, knowing that we would add to it from a room tax generation standpoint to get to a better total return, with the objective of getting to year 3 to make sure that the district was getting a 5% return on their investment. And then obviously hoping that return then continues to increase as we both increase the rent. You'll notice that top line increases the rent by 5% every single year. And then of course the room tax generation has increased each year too. Now, none of this is set in stone. Obviously, we haven't signed a lease. This is intended to be an example of how we may be able to get an appropriate return back to the district for under a lease.
Okay. And I think it's 2.5%.
Yeah, I agree.
3 million, yeah. Okay, we are kind of at our time to move on. Can we continue this conversation in our regular board meeting? And then maybe if Jim jumps on, we can discuss philosophy. Is that okay? Keep things rolling?
Good by me, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Yes, Madam Chair, you'll want to, depending on what we have in our agenda, you'll want to make a motion to
Adjourn and, yeah.
adjourn, and then you'll need to amend your agenda, and you'll have a good faith reason, obviously, or maybe it's already in there, right? Pat, is it already in there?
It's already in there. It's item, pardon me, B, under other business, preliminary ICA draft agreement. And then C is Idaho Competitive Aquatics with Ryan. So it's under C, Idaho Competitive Aquatics.
Yeah. So if you want to change the order, obviously you'll just need to make a motion to change the order. Otherwise, it's perfect. Great, Pat. Good job.
Well, hopefully you guys can stick around and we'll just kind of keep moving on. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn our work session at this time.
I'll make the motion, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Hy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, meeting is adjourned. And do you guys need a bio break or should we just keep rolling into the meeting?
I'm okay.
Okay, let's get going. Okay, so I called meeting to order. Roll call. Pam?
I don't think you're. Don't push it.
Don't push it.
Don't push it.
Ms. Mucko,
Here.
Mr. Walker, Mr. Clock,
Here.
Mr. Oliver, Mr. Olson.
Here.
Great, thank you. Do I have any changes or additions to the agenda?
Madam Chair,
Yes?
what was the motion to move which, I'm sorry, I don't have the agenda in front of me.
That's
Which-
okay.
Which letter are we moving up in the agenda?
Well, I don't know if we need to. Can we just keep the order as is, or do you feel like you guys, well, do you guys need to
I'm
leave?
sorry. No, I'm fine with it. I just thought that's what you wanted to do or Michael wanted to do, was move it up in the agenda. No, we're fine. Never mind. Thank you.
I guess it all depends on Ryan's group's availability, if you want to just continue that conversation up front and then let them go.
That's what I thought we would do.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris, I think that'd be our preference. And I
perfect.
didn't have any other items to present, so I'm just open for Q&A right now.
Okay, yeah, so with that in mind, I would like to entertain a motion to move, let's see. Under other business, I would move item B, C, and D probably up above the financial report. Is that right?
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
And Madam Chair, your good faith reason will be to accommodate the schedule of our guests.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Sorry, your good faith reason will be to accommodate the schedule of our guests.
Great, yes. Do I need to state that?
Kristen, Madam
Yes,
Chair, we also need to strike the audit presentation for this meeting.
okay.
Thank you.
So the motion would be to move B, C, and D due to the fact of our guest schedule and to strike item A, the audit presentation, because I do not believe we have an audit update at this point in time that is ready.
I'll make that motion, Madam Chair.
Great,
Both
thank
points.
you. Thanks. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, okay. Agenda is amended. Okay, I have no chairman's remarks. We'll keep moving through. I would like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our regular meeting, March 23rd.
I'll move.
All
Second.
right. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. The amended agenda, we will continue on with ICA, Ryan's group. And you said that you did not have any further presentation items, Ryan?
No, I think we covered kind of all the major bullet points. And again, the additional materials in the financial projections are really just the details that support the data that was on those first pages. So at this point, we're certainly just open for any questions that you guys might have.
Madam Chair, Pat, what action are you looking for on B, C, and D?
Madam Chair, Jody,
Mhm.
I'll answer that, but there was a question that came in from somebody online regarding whether the aquatic center presentation was moved somehow. And I'm not clear on the question, but if I can try to answer that very quickly for those that are online, that the work session agenda specifically says that the discussion of aquatics facility. And then the agenda follows that. So the whole purpose of the work session was specifically the aquatics center. So again, we didn't change anything. There was discussion resulting from the initial work session meeting that Also on the regular agenda, item C under other business, Idaho Competitive Aquatics, Ryan Stratton. So the topic of the Aquatic Center was fully vetted on both the work session agenda as well as the regular agenda. So I'm hoping that that answers the viewer's question as to topics.
Thanks, Pat. And that was also posted online on the district's website. And I know I pushed that out via my Facebook page. So the work session agenda was posted and did not change.
That's correct. So everything was duly posted as required.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that that answers the question that was posed. And Jody, to your question, the only action item that I specifically need today is under D, the CSL pool study, and it is listed as an action item. It's specifically addressing the CSL proposal that was presented to me and I passed on to the board regarding specifically the peer review. There were two things in that CSL report proposal, and the first is a peer review, and that's the only thing I'm requesting today. But we'll get there, but hopefully that answered. Did I answer that?
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Pat, is this the same group that did the study for us a couple of years ago?
Convention Sports and Leisure has done several, yes. Hi. They are one that we have used in the past.
Now, what is this study for? And how much will it cost? I know you'll get into it when you get to that point, but I was just curious.
It's a peer review, and I can get into the specifics, and it's $17,000.
No, we'll get to, when you get to the point in the agenda.
Okay. I'm sorry, Jody, did I answer the question for you?
Yeah, I think we're there.
Okay.
Pat distributed the contract from the consultant earlier today, and it's 11 pages of gobbledygook, but what we're paying for is some comfort from an outside independent agency that this proposal makes sense, that the revenues are generally as they're predicting.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Are generally reasonable, and the probability of getting these people to come to Boise is appropriate.
Yeah. No, CSL is, they provided us with a lot of data that led us to the new expansion.
So when we get there, I would move approval of the CSL study, although I thought that was in your authority to just do it, Pat.
Yeah. How much is it going to cost, Pat?
Yes, Jody, it is within the provisions the board has approved for, or allows me to approve. High at $17,000. Jody, back to
Yeah.
you. The reason that I felt compelled to bring it to the board is just because it is part of the process, and I just want to make sure that
Sure.
it was presented to the full board for their edification. Just transparency and process.
Yep. No, that's good. 17,000 is a good investment for our project.
Madam Chair, we probably should note for the record that Board Member Walker is now on.
Yes. So Jim, thanks for joining. Any questions that you might have for Ryan? I know you missed the presentation, but you should have received a packet ahead of time that had a lot of financials in there.
I had a chance to review, but I have no questions at this time.
Okay, so something that we did not get a chance to really discuss during the work session is really the board's philosophy regarding land ownership and this type of agreement and the operational involvement. We touched upon a little bit regarding that for this type of project. And really, you know, legally, Mike Stoddard presented that we can enter in, and this would fulfill the public need that we have as part of our statutes. But it's really, you know, does the board feel that entering into a land ownership agreement with these folks or any folks is something that you are okay doing philosophically on what our goals are. I know, speaking personally, I'm okay with, entering into an agreement like we've got kind of started to go down the road as far as land ownership, especially if we put in some of those benchmarks, as Mike had mentioned, within the contract regarding making sure that they're meeting the public need, and doing reporting out, I would think at least quarterly, and really managing some of the expectations there as far as room nights and different types of events that are held. Any other discussion, any other feelings? that the board-
Madam Chair, I have something that you just mentioned about and I wanted to ask Mike about this, how he felt about charging the public for use of the facility, even if it's just coming in to swim in the swimming pool.
Madam Chair, hi. I think it's, assuming I understand your question, I am not certain it's really any different than when the district, or I guess it's the center, is charging folks for use of its facilities. I think in general, I mean, the
Okay.
I think that's correct. The ICA folks are going to obviously, operate it on an ability to keep the operation going, but I think it'll be, obviously generally open to folks who are, willing to pay the relatively modest sum they're asking.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other philosophical or legal questions regarding the land ownership piece?
I just might comment, Madam Chair, that when I came on this board 2 years ago, there were a lot of people saying we could only do big projects, which we manage directly. And I think as a board, we've rejected that limitation.
Right,
We're willing to
Mike,
do what we can do with the resources we have within the purpose for which we were created.
I agree with Member Olson on that one.
yeah. And as long as we don't have any legal issues, and then the operational involvement, we've kind of discussed that. Jody, do you feel comfortable with that piece, or do you have any other questions regarding operational involvement?
I do not, although I'm anxious to see the contract be created.
Yes, and that'll be a negotiation between the parties, correct, Mike?
Yes, Madam Chair. And and so I think getting back to the sort of the draft agreement that we, presumably will be working on over the next few months. Again, I think the important point, as you've mentioned, is that we've got the statutory ability to do this under 4922A, and we're otherwise going to then include in the contract all the provisions to ensure that we're meeting our public purpose needs. So I think it all sort of dovetails together to create an agreement which ensures that we're meeting all the constitutional and statutory requirements we have to meet.
Great, thank you. Since we kind of smushed item B and C together, Mike, Pat, did you have any other comments regarding the ICA draft agreement?
Sure.
I'm sorry, what was that?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, great. Any other questions for Ryan's group? Any other discussion regarding land ownership, operations involvement, any of the items that they have presented thus far?
Madam Chair, I have one final question for Ryan,
Yes.
if I can. What's your timeline on this whole project? What are you anticipating going down the road to where you open the door?
I think, Melanie and I were hoping to have it open 6 months ago, but we know that's not practical. Certainly learned a lot about acquiring land and the length it took to find a parcel. And of course, now we're going through the lengthy process of the due diligence. And so, you know, we've got 50 to 80 more days of due diligence, at least 30 days of closing. We obviously have to get through a permitting process. I anticipate that we're looking at a fall timeframe to put a shovel in the ground, and ideally can be open, you know, the first part of 2022.
Thank you.
And then, Madam Chair, just to kind of clarify our process as you know, Pat indicated earlier, obviously we had these discussions during the work session as reflected on that agenda. And, you know, all of these items are listed as action items are on our agenda here. Again, I think as Pat mentioned, we're not looking for any action on at least B and C, I believe, correct, Pat?
That's correct.
Right. So there's again, I think we've tracked through our various agendas for the work session and this session, but we're again not, I believe, looking for anything from the board until we get to D or C. D.
Item D.
I don't know my alphabet well enough. That's
Great, thanks, Mike. One question regarding the draft agreement that you mentioned regarding the default. What happens if they default? And you said essentially we would take over the ownership of the facility. And I'm assuming that includes the pool and the changing room, and that's what your thoughts are.
yeah, you know, obviously we've never actually discussed this with them and how we would structure. I think again, presumably if there's an event of default, if they're unable to perform, effectively the remedy presumably is the lease goes away and therefore we own the property and effectively most everything on it. Again, subject to all the things you'd see in a lease normally, which would be things about personal property and more importantly, I think would be the remedies. Obviously, nobody's going into this with the idea that the project doesn't work. I mean, that's the reason that Ryan and his group have spent so much time doing the diligence and creating all these projections and whatnot. So, but yeah, I think the way you've described it is generally how it would end up if everything goes to hell in a handbasket and they're unable to perform, then ultimately it's for better or worse our land and I guess whatever's on it, and Pat then and the board gets to determine what's the best next step.
Great, thanks, Mike. So regarding the ICA draft agreement, really it's just keep working on it. Like you mentioned, it doesn't sound like there's any action item on that today, but sounds like we have not gotten to the point of discussing it with the other party. So correct, Mike, just keep working on it?
Yes, ma'am.
Great, okay. Item C, Idaho Competitive Aquatics, Ryan Stratton. Any other questions that the board has for his group or amongst ourselves to Mike or Pat? Okay. All right, so B and C, on to D, CSL pool study. Pat, did you have more information you'd like to present?
Just the highlight, Madam Chair, of page 2 of the agreement. I did forward this to the board, but if for some reason they didn't get it, basically the review, again, it's a peer review, which, and I'll just highlight very, very quickly. Basically, it's to review the reasonableness of the ICA proposal assumptions that have been brought up through various discussions. And again, even today, it's utilization, attendance, and its verification of this information. Utilization, attendance, facility, program, and site, financial operations, economic impact, and then business plan funding and proposed P3 terms. So again, it was felt in our discussions that were held with Jody and myself, Kristen and Mike, pardon me, about this, that we elicit proposals. Again, CSL has been a vendor of choice in the past. They have an expertise in this particular arena. So the proposed, again, there's 2 phases in this, but phase 2 gets into a deeper dive that at this time we don't think is really necessary. So For phase one, which is the peer review, they're asking for an agreed price of $17,000. So specifically, I'm asking the board to approve that expenditure, and I'll initiate the letter of agreement this afternoon if the board so approves.
Thanks, Pat. And it will take 3 to 4 weeks for the phase one?
That's correct. They're estimating 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay. And I would assume they would start on it right away?
Yes. They're prepared to.
Thanks,
Well,
Pat.
I'll make the motion that we approve the 17,000 for Pat to hire CSL for the peer review.
Great. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great. Thanks, Pat. If you would execute that agreement and have communication with them so that they can start their process, that would be great.
And then, Madam Chair, just to tie the,
Yes.
tie this back again to our timing here, again, the concept would be that Pat will hopefully, get these folks engaged. We get it hopefully for a month or so, and then that will be the basis, as I think I mentioned in the work session, that we would use to, assuming it's positive, uses some of the basis of the requirements we're looking for in the lease agreement. So
Yep.
we would provide that basis and background in order to, make certain we're meeting our public purpose.
Great. Thank you. And it sounds like we could have this all, at least the report done by our next meeting.
I'd go 1 month after that. Just a suggestion. Pat?
Yes, sir. As soon as they get it back, the board will be notified. So
How long do you think that'll take?
they're estimating 3 to 4 weeks.
All right.
Okay. Great. All right. So that concludes the portion with Ryan and his group. You're welcome to stay or leave if you would like. Okay, moving back up to item number C under the number 4C on the agenda, monthly activity and financial report. Pat and Anne Marie.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. A couple of quick highlights that made notes after this was sent out, but we did host a forum for Chief Lee and Officer Ed Moreno, who's the new downtown BPD community rep. And that went very well. We hosted the meeting on behalf of the Downtown Boise Association, and it was well attended, some great questions, and continue to be impressed by Chief Lee. And I think Officer Moreno will be a great addition to downtown. Couple of highlights. First and foremost, I want to welcome Pam back. It's really fun to actually have her in the office. The front door is now open from 9 to 4 every day. So we're getting back to small steps to normalcy, and it's just great to have the team coming back. So Easter, we hosted a group, Latino group, a religious convention, 650 people, and this is all done with the auspices and the approval of Central District Health. They have to approve everything, and they have been very, very helpful. So again, and that was all in the ballroom. So that was good. This last weekend, we hosted 2 dance groups, dance cheer competitions. Very busy, went very well. Again, approved by CDH. Last week, there were 2 days, so we had 3 events in one day and 4 events in one day. So again, we hadn't seen that in 13 months. Again, events have gone very well. We have a tasting this afternoon for a wedding that's coming up this summer. So we're finding that the wheels can be a little shaky when we haven't been running at 100 miles an hour for the last year, but the team's doing well. And I just, I can't tell you how much we appreciate the board's support over the last several months and staying open and continuing to operate the sales team and the event marketing team. It's showing results. So, and I hope you can be proud of us for for what we're accomplishing. I just received a Smith Travel report that's a special report that we had done. It's just 15 select properties that are closer to downtown in the convention center. We've been doing this for the last couple of years, but March on March occupancy levels, we were 25% up from March of 2020, 25% increase. And the rate was month on month, February, the average rate in that select group was $107, and the rate in March was $117. So again, from a market perspective, the market's showing strength. March also had Big Sky Tournament in it, and that was just the teams, because they were very well, and they could have I want to say 100 people total in the arena. So we didn't see we didn't get the whole impact of what that tournament can really provide, but nonetheless, I think that was a contributing factor. So again, we're showing some positive growth in that area. So we also were able to meet with Chase Erkins, our new board member. Did an orientation with him. I thought it went very well, and it was informative. Mike, I, and Chase met. And again, I appreciate Chase's time on coming in and learning more about us and the role he'll be playing with us. So again, Chase was elected to the board in the last election. We didn't actually have to have go formal voting because he ran unopposed. 110 and 120 meeting rooms continue to be under renovation. If anybody's interested, when you're in the building, we're replacing wall covering, replace the air walls, and we'll be working on glass.
Pat, Madam Chair, can I ask Pat a question?
Sure.
Pat, when you say the room occupancy rate is up 25%, what is it overall right now?
For the last month, I want to say it was, and I might look at Anne Marie for this because I believe it's here in the report, but I want to say it was 58% last month, but it was 62% and it was 38% last year.
38%?
That was a year ago. Yeah.
A year ago.
So
Really? Yeah. It's been a year. All right. Thanks, Pat.
yes, sir. Several site tours continue to take place. In fact, we had a group in today. We hosted for lunch of local meeting planners, and there were 20, I think there were 25 in attendance for lunch today. And then they were going to do group tours after that. So again, lots of interest in the facility. We're looking at sponsoring some job and career fairs in May and June. We're going to need significant hiring back. One of the things that dawned on us was, we normally count on BSU and the other colleges to be in session. And when you're missing 20,000 people in a community that normally you count on for an employment base, they're just simply not here. So it's going to be an interesting spring and summer as we compete with everybody else for employees, as we hopefully will get the college kids back in this summer for fall semester. So anyway, we're going to be aggressive in that. I'd also like to mention, celebrate some years of service. I mean, Stacy Funk, some of you may not know her or see her very often. She's our Director of Human Resources. We think she started here when she was 12, but she's our matriarch. She actually has been the longest serving current employee at 31 years. Chris Lochner, Director of Food and Beverage. Chris has been here and gone. He's taken some opportunities. He was at McCormick Place in Chicago for a term. He's helped out in Orlando, Florida earlier in his career, but collectively he's got 24 years with us. So again, really highlighting the longevity of the team, the dedication that we have among our staff. Chris Morrison, actually, who's doing the AV Tech today, he's our patriarch at 25 years. He started when he was 13. Some hybrid and virtual events. Again, this is just some highlights that we try to let you know what's going on. That virtual is going to be with us. We don't see that going away certainly anytime soon. And it's the key of our IT and AV departments who are really making this work. So again, we have several coming up, pardon me, in the next 30, 60 days. again, I see it minimizing a bit later in the year, but again, events that will be with us nonetheless, virtual component. Visitors, just total for the year where we're seeing visitations from. Again, Idaho leads, but California, Oregon, Utah, Washington, which is really no. The goals, revenues, expenses. One of the highlights on here, there's a line that I asked Anne Marie to add, and if you look under additional capital needs, it's $6 million. And I want to highlight that that's actually, those capital needs are over the next 3 years, roughly $2 million a year. So we're not just plugging $6 million into the budget necessarily, but the effort here is to let the board know that we'll be spending about $2 million a year. Normally we spend less, and we normally give money back at the end of the year. But as we start looking at projects, particularly Boise Center East, it was completed in 2016. 2023 is that 7-year rotation. We've missed a year with COVID. So some of the projects are getting pushed back, but it's the timing of the projects as much as what they are. We're limited in the scope of the number of weeks that we have to get things done like carpet and wall covering and such. If anybody's ever interested, you're down here. I can walk you through Boise Center East and show you the carpet that we're needing to replace. It's starting to wear out in a couple of areas. We're going to start on level 2. So this isn't saying we're going to spend $2 million a year, but I wanted to make the board aware of potential investment each year and over the next 3 years, probably $2 million each, just so you're prepared ahead of time, so it doesn't hit you at the budget time. The other thing is I want to make sure that everyone understands that while we operate fiscally conservative, I think we do a good job in managing our cash. We do have to invest in the buildings, and it's significant. And so when people see our cash balances, sometimes there's a question as to what are we doing with it, and we're putting it back into the facilities. We have a reputation to maintain among our friends in the hospitality community. Certainly, we owe it to the community to maintain our building in the highest level of quality that we can. So that's how we spend our money, and I want to make sure that again we're ahead of that, answering any questions. So again, ongoing projects in West, as I've already talked about, and then other projects will continue to roll out, lobby carpet and that sort of thing, both in East and West. So, pardon me. To the point, here's the capital layout. Talking about occupancy and average rate. As I mentioned, hotel occupancies continue to improve. ADR continues to improve. The market is showing very, very positive signs of coming back. Same thing with demand and revenues. Talked about that. So again, the dots and the lines are going in the right direction. As we look at involvement with the sales team, we continue to get contracts for signature. Pardon me, next year is looking very, very strong. We're looking at a strong 21 third and fourth quarters. People are maintaining, particularly the state conventions. We've got some conventions coming up in June and July that are state oriented, and they're maintaining. They're planning to be here. And again, based on the support from Central District Health, we see no reason why that won't take place. As we look at the grid for 22 and 23, we're getting a lot more inquiries for 23. In fact, the problem with 22 is we're running out of space. Good problem to have, but we're just having a difficult time. A lot of people pushed from 20 and even early 21 into next year. So we've been able to fill in those dates. A lot of inquiries for 23 and even 24. We've had a couple of site visits over the last 2 weeks, both for 2024, and they're very sizable conventions. With that, I'll turn it over to Anne Marie.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and board members. As you can see here, we actually had some revenue in the Boise Center for which is good news, as Pat has indicated. We are running favorably to budget. We have a positive variance on a combined basis of $598,000. Next slide, please. If you look, can see here on the far right hand side, we're at $1,000,005 for tax revenues. We're over budget by $276,000. And our monthly revenue was also over budget by $74,000. Again, as we've been noticing over the last several months, our tax revenue has stabilized. It's down about 33% over the past 8 months, but it is continuing to trend, like Pat says, in an upward direction. Next slide, please. Wanted to just note again, you know, our revenue's increasing. We had 10 events this month, up from 1 in the prior month. Event days are up, room nights are up, day visits are up, utilization's up, revenue's up. Our EBITDA loss is stable and it's similar to the prior 2 months, and our net loss is less than budget by $185,000. So all very positive, exciting news. Year to date, we're continuing along. Our EBITDA loss is $200,000 less than budget. So even though our revenues are lower, we've been able to control our costs to maintain our loss. Next slide, please. This is our utilization. You can see in March, that black line is showing some indications up. We're continuing, and you'll notice those black lines in April are increasing, May is increasing, and then you go to August, September, and October, we're back up into our optimal target range. So those are all, again, more good news. Next slide, please. Our operating revenue, March, you know, still significantly below budget, but trending, you can start to see we're starting in an upward trend in that red line at the bottom. Next slide, please. Just again, I'm going to leave this slide in for a while because it lays out our road to recovery and the things that need to happen for our convention center to get back to full capacity. And number one is the distribution of the vaccines, a critical milestone. It's really that gives the traveler the perception of a sense of safety. We have some pent up leisure travel. Our local events are starting to increase. The city of Boise turned event approval over to Central District Health. And so that has been a positive move as well. As Pat indicated, we had an event in with over 650 people. The governor's reopening plan, he is looking at some metrics to determine what those stage 4 metrics are going to look like to allow us to move to the next stage. On the business travel side, that's going to be what takes to recover our conventions. The out-of-state conventions, we have some regional snapbacks coming on. It's going to be a little longer recovery for the rest of those events. Next slide, please. I thought I'll start adding this slide too, just because when we talk about the first step to recovery, which is the vaccinations. So this shows us how many people are fully vaccinated. This was as of last week, or April 12th. You can see Idaho's, they're above 20%. You can, the size of the bubble is the population. So I thought this was a very good chart to give you an idea of the percentage of people that are vaccinated and where the states are moving through the cycle. Next slide. This one is now, so you had the fully vaccinated before, and this is the group that has at least 1 dose. So you can start to see the 1 doses are moving through the chart. And so next month, you'll see in that fully vaccinated chart that it will continue to move to the right, and this will continue hopefully to move to the right. Next slide, please. This is shows us when the majority of the people in our state might be fully vaccinated. This was for the United States. And it shows here that they believe 85% will be vaccinated by August 18th. Next slide, please. And for Idaho, it shows September 7th would be at 85%. Next slide, please. Pent-up demand, again, leisure leads the way. There's just a couple points here. Given the pent-up demand, the travel industry looks to leisure travel to power the onset of a recovery. Group business and corporate travel will be toward the latter part of the year before we see meaningful progress, but overall, we're starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. Next slide, please. The business travel recovery, business revenues will drive the recovery first. So we'll need to continue to see businesses recover and generate more revenue and be willing to invest in travel and training. And then from there, events will follow. Next slide, please. We did take the audit update off the schedule, but I did want to just give a brief update. We did get, Rachel was unable to attend today due to a family emergency. We don't have a full audit to present. We do have a preliminary draft audit with some numbers for us to review. So I'll be going through that. We probably need to set up a special board meeting to review the audit so that we can get it approved and get it distributed as needed to satisfy the bond requirements. So I'll turn that back to you, Madam Chair. And thank you. Any questions?
Any questions for Pat or Anne Marie?
Madam Chair, I will mention too that Ally and Carrie Westergaard with the CVB and Ally Raborti, Director of Sales, have been working very closely together to have another big leisure push for this summer. While the local meetings and for the state are picking up for us, as I mentioned before, and they're holding solid. We think that there's going to be, based on our surrounding states where they sit currently on vaccinations and such, we think that we're going to see another huge leisure year. And again, the trends are moving in the right direction. We're hearing some really positive things about the travel and tourism market in Idaho this year. The state's doing a good job, Department of Tourism. So again, we're counting on another really strong leisure push this summer.
Great, thank you. It's good to see the numbers are headed in the right direction. And we'll just inform the board based on what we get from the audit. Anne Marie, right? You'll let us know if we need to schedule, when we need to schedule. We'll send out a email.
Thank you.
Great. Anything else? Any other questions? Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the monthly activity and financial report.
So move.
A second?
Second.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? Great. Monthly activity and financial report is approved. Just want to look at my agenda since we move things around. I believe we have everything that we've covered. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, guys. See you soon.